Welcome back to the chat room as we continue with today's edition. And joining me in the chat room is Cecilia Saidi, who is a nutritionist. She's here to talk about stress management. We meet again.
Thank you, Yanko.
Welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
I remember the very first time when you came through, I was actually the very same person who had you interviewed. But you're here on a different note, and you're here to talk about stress management.
Yes.
How best would you define stress?
So, stress, so firstly, because you've introduced me as a nutritionist, but I also do psychotherapy.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm also a counselor.
All right.
So, stress is how the body responds to a demand trigger. The way a person would anticipate a threatening situation would cause the body to release hormones. It would go into a surge of hormones. Among the hormones are cortisol and adrenaline. So these hormones will cause the body to produce more energy and strength. This is a good thing, actually.
It is?
It is.
Okay.
If the trigger is caused by it's physical in nature. It causes a person to increase their flight and fight mode. They go into fight and flight, so it increases them the risk for them to adapt. So one can fight or flee the scene.
And that means if you have the ability to do such, you can.
Actually, the hormones, the energy that comes with the surge of the hormones is going to make you cause the ability for you to do that.
Okay.
So that's a good thing. But when the trigger or the demand is emotional, then that's a bad thing. Because the energy that we're talking about, you don't have an outlet for it.
Okay.
So there's so many things that are going to result as that are going to be as a result of that energy. And well, obviously it's not a good thing.
Okay.
So that's where the stress part is considered to be bad.
Okay. So what are some of the factors that lead to stress?
Well, it's an endless list. There are some other things that universally or generally would say, well, this is a cause of stress. For example, if you lose your job, or you lose a loved one, or somebody is in hospital, somebody is sick that is close to you, that's a potential cause of stress. But sometimes it's the way an individual will interpret a situation. For example, if you and I are driving to work and it's 6:45, you're in front of my car, I'm behind. I'll be in the car enjoying my music. I know that my reporting hour is 7:30. Whilst you in front of me, you'd be so stressed because there are 10 cars ahead of you. And you feel, well, I have to be on my desk by 7, and I still have a long way to go. So the way I interpret 10 cars ahead of me would be, well, this is a time for me just to
Relax.
to relax, to think through some things, and well, I have so much time to get to work. Whilst for you, it'll be, you'll get into a panic because you feel, well, I don't want my boss to see me late again because this has been happening. So the way we respond to a threatening trigger or demand can also be an interpretation of an individual. But there's so many things that can cause stress.
But you have clearly stipulated that the different situations that kind of trigger stress, some are triggered by emotions, some are actually triggered by physical endurances that people actually do go through. But is the understanding far-fetched to the after effects are pretty much similar?
Yes, yes. So the after effects, like I said, if it's a physical trigger, it's going to help you. The stress is going to help you. Because your coping abilities are going to be increased. Like I said, the flight and fight. But if it's an emotional trigger, then you'd find one would be sweating, they'll develop a headache. For example, just telling somebody to do a presentation in front of people. Another person would feel, well, that's a motivation. Whilst another person will look at that as a threatening situation. So the results, either whether it's a physical trigger or an emotional trigger, the results are pretty much the same. And then we can categorize them as short-term and long-term effects of stress.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. What does stress management involve?
Stress management, we would broadly just categorize it in 4 A's.
Okay.
So there's one where we say avoid the stress. There are things that we can actually avoid. So like I said, I talked about traffic, which is mostly much of a concern these days, especially rush hours, peak hours. If you know that you have a long way to go and your route usually is traffic jammed, you have to prepare well in advance. So you leave home maybe 15, 30 minutes earlier. The things that you can avoid. Not only that, so many causes, like I said, of stress. If you know that if I get into a conversation with this person, usually it's always negative talk. You avoid talks with that person. So avoiding is one of it. So there's so many things that you do around avoiding stress. You can also alter the situation. There are times where, well, things go this way. But if you feel like every time things go this way, it's a routine, but it doesn't help, you'll have to make adjustments to alter. And again, if you can alter the situation, you adapt, you change yourself. You've joined a workplace or a group where things have to be done in a certain way. Then you feel each time you're out of it, you feel, well, I'm stressed, I don't like how things are done. But if it's a requirement that things have to be done that way, you have to alter. So that's managing yourself, because you can't change the way things are done. And again, you also talk about therapy. Okay, so we're talking about psychotherapy, which is talk therapy. You go in a place where you sit one-on-one with an individual and you talk through your issues. So that would also help you to process your thoughts. And there's so many techniques that are used.
There are some other situations where you can hardly prevent yourself from getting stressed. For example, in a situation that you said, you have to avoid most of the situations that get you into a position where you'll be stressed. But perhaps you woke up late and your alarm clock didn't wake you up on time, but you're still late. How do you control yourself in such a situation where you feel like, I'm still stressed, I wish I had done things better, but I woke up late, I'm still stuck in a traffic jam? How do you get yourself, controlled?
So such things like that you can avoid, obviously. So, and again, you're already caught up in the situation. So there isn't pretty much that you can do to avoid things that have already been done. But how you manage now, how you respond to that, which also takes us to the word anxiety. Because a stress, like I said, is how the body is responding to a trigger. But then the way you react to that trigger or to that response would cause you to go into anxiety. So anxiety is a sustained feeling of a response to stress. So for example, you're already in the traffic jam and you're late for work, but then it takes you the whole day, you're just thinking about it. You say, well, I was late, how can I do this to myself? Yesterday I was also late. And you're just processing that thought the whole day. You obviously are going to develop a headache. You're going to develop maybe even a stomach cramp. So it's how you respond and manage to the reaction that has caused the trigger. What will also cause other effects. That's anxiety. So that's a difference, how you manage stress for things that you cannot avoid.
What are some of the effects of an unmanaged stress?
So the short term, like I said, we have headache, we have being sweaty. For example, you're making a presentation, I'm talking like this, and then you develop a dry mouth, or just a mental block, and you just forget words. Sometimes you're about to get into an interview and you ask to go to the toilet because you've developed loose stools or frequent urination or irritability. So these are just short term. After the threatening situation, what is perceived to be the threatening situation has passed, they also go. But there are long term effects of stress.
Which are?
So insomnia. You might get into a situation where you're failing to sleep. You actually have to use sleeping pills. Or you go into depression. And very very important for me to mention that there are also some other diseases or disorders that are caused or as a result of stress, which can be diabetes, hypertension. So when I say that the body goes into a surge of emotions, one of them being cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone that is produced when one has low blood sugar. So for people that have diabetes, especially type 2, and they have frequent episodes of stress, it's also very bad because it increases their blood sugar and also make their situation worse. So the cortisol and other hormones as well as the stress, it also causes blood pressure to rise. It also increases cholesterol levels. So it also puts you at a risk of cardiovascular diseases. So there's so much hidden aside stress than what we just see on the surface.
You just talked about an important element, depression. How does stress escalate into depression?
So depression, rather, it's complex other than stress, like I said, because there are also some other factors that come into play. For example, the brain structure, the chemicals in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
It can also be the traits that one is born with. For example, as people that are born from mothers that have been categorized with depression, they can also get that. But for stress, when it's not managed, when it's sustained, it long term it will result into anxiety and depression. So that would be the end of the spectrum of the feelings that one is keeping.
These talk and therapy sessions, do they really work?
They do quite a lot.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So you go through processes where you're processing your thoughts, your emotions, and your behavior toward the situation that you're perceiving as threatening.
Okay.
And they do
Wow.
help.
Any other related information that you may wish to put across before we wrap up?
Well, one should be aware of the levels of stress that he or she is experiencing. And obviously, like we've said, seeking help is very important. Because once you sustain a little stress that would go, well, I'm not very much stressed, so I can manage it. But if you don't process that, then it might lead into something big. Not only mental, like we've discussed, also physical. So diabetes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular diseases. So it's really something that people really have to take time to know what are my levels of stress and how do I cope towards certain situations.
Considering the conditions that you have treated thus far, how big is this of a problem in Malawi?
Well,
Stress?
it's a big problem, but like I always say, because our culture, we haven't developed that tendency of seeking help when you have issues, because you feel, well, I can manage. But people are opening up, and then they're embracing how much psychotherapy is of help. So yeah, people do now, well, seek, so who do I talk to? Whether informally or formally, but talking is really helpful.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Cecilia Saidi, for coming to the program.
Thank you, Uncle.
All right, there you have it from Cecilia Saidi, who is a psychotherapist, talking about stress management. I'm hoping that you have captured enough information from what she has actually uttered. But Breakfast Live continues.